everyone, and welcome to Artists in Ascension. This is your host, Nancy Waite. We have a guest coming up shortly. Nadine May will be calling in from Cape Town, South Africa. And she's a novelist and a light worker and has some wonderful things to share with us today. So we're in for a treat. We are going to bring on Nadine. Nadine, can you hear me? Oh, there you are. Welcome.
Yes.
Hello. And welcome to Artists in Ascension. You have so much to tell us. I don't know where you want to start. I love this interview that you did a few years ago. Well, actually, it was in 2002 that you have shared with me. And maybe we can go over some of that material as well, because I know a lot of people from the Gold Ring already know something about you, but there's so much. So is there anything particular that you would like to start out with, or shall we look at the interview that you did?
Oh, that's fine. The interview was, like I said, quite a few years ago. I was a bit restricted. It wasn't particularly radio show to do with ascension topics. So I had to be very careful. She had certain questions she asked me to write down. So, it's sometimes difficult to have an interview with someone who is actually not really on your wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to be, you can't be so free. And that's why this is going to be so wonderful, because all the people here are on the same wavelength.
I know. Well, what would you like to start out with? Do you want to just start out with why you started writing these books and tell us a bit what they're about?
Okay, well, I can just start at the beginning how it started for me, because it was a long time ago. I think it was about 28 when I had my first, I would call it a psychic experience. I didn't call it that. I actually thought it was something going wrong with me. I've always talked to myself. I'm somebody who always has conversations with myself. And sometimes there were periods in my life that the conversations with myself were the most interesting compared to conversations I had with other people. And I think that's more or less how I used to be. But I also talked to myself as a child. And I remember this particular morning specifically because it was early in the morning. I just had dropped my kid to school. And I had my first cigarette. Yeah, believe me, I was a heavy smoker. And I had this voice suddenly spoke back to me. Now, I've always talked to myself, but I certainly never heard a voice talking back to me. So, I practically jumped out of my skin and I ran to the radio to see if it was on. I looked behind the curtains and there was nobody there. And I thought this was really, really weird. But I sat down again and I started to talk back. And this is how I started. This is just the beginning. Now, in my novel, I start the same way. Not quite. I have romanticized it a bit. But what Ingrid experiences is the same, except that she is behind a computer. When it happens to me, there weren't no computers. I also was very unaware about all this work. I hardly knew the word reincarnation was even new to me. I was totally asleep when this happened. Yeah, you can imagine it totally shook me. Stopped smoking and never touched a cigarette after that moment. That's one thing. So that was definitely a good cure for me. There was a lot of things that I was told, but I didn't take it all in. It was a period that I now consider I was downloaded with information, and I understood that everything would come clear to me if I was ready. But I didn't quite understand it then. I remember talking back saying, well, I don't want to grow, because I thought the voice meant that I would physically become bigger. I couldn't understand the information that I was receiving. I was told not to worry, that it would all come in the right time. Well, this is now many, many years later. It is totally true. We seem to come across immaterial no matter what at time. It sometimes comes in strange ways. Because I had this one experience and later a few others, could recognize when those moments arrived. Over the periods of years, I also realized that when you, say, touch a tree or we have very big boulders in our garden. Boulders, big rocks, hold an enormous amount of information from the planet. I'm starting to get very sensitive to all that. But because I was trying to explain my experiences to others, so I gave drawing workshops in those days, I was also in an environment with people, they had no idea what I was on about. I had to keep it all by myself. if I would speak to people and I would dare mention certain things, I would only get into trouble. It took me a while before I was ready to write this down. I mean, that's many years later. My first novel was written in 1995, and it took me 5 years to write.
Do you want to tell us why you chose a novel?
I was told to do so.
Oh,
I was told to create a background so that people could actually read a fictional plot, which I understood was in their mind when they read fiction, they create their own stage. And the characters in the novel is very often readers automatically will create visions and feelings of personalities that they know in their lives. So they become part of the plot, but it will still stay their perception. A fictional story doesn't interfere with people's perception of truth. It just gets them into a story, and it's a bit like a movie. A certain section of a movie will appeal to you or will trigger you, and the person next to you has a completely different part of a movie that makes a difference. So that's where we are different. And through fiction, you sometimes can get an idea across. Of course, it also comes from my perception, but I think I'm trying to write it on various levels. My first novel was called My Lovely Going Home, and that was the free ebook that I gave you. And then it was rewritten because the technology was getting very far ahead, and I thought, no, I need to rewrite this to be a bit more authentic, and I had to push this whole ascension journey a bit up, because when I started reading it, it was actually really about the year 2000 when all that information was clear to me in the first book. I also was told that there were 5 stages before the ascension actually started. When I say I was told, it wasn't so much in words. I find it always difficult to explain how information comes. It doesn't always, for me, it doesn't come in words. I think in pictures. So for me, it comes in images. It comes in ideas. It comes constantly in aha moments. That's only I can explain it. And then I always ask for proof. And I walk around, well, if this is true, then I want some proof. And then the proof comes in the most weirdest moments. And I'm always amazed when it does. So that's how really I can say I experience the information that comes. I can sometimes see wait in the supermarket, and I'm standing behind somebody with a child on their back. In fact, it's common to see a mother and a child on the back. Mm-hmm. They sort of tie them down with a cloth, and you just look at the child because the child is facing you. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the child, and I sort of think, okay, I'm going to see if I can do something here. And I'm visualizing butterflies. I'm always very good at butterflies, and I'm visualizing butterflies, projecting these butterflies in front of the child, and lo and behold, this starting to look around. It sees something. It's a baby, it's small, it sees something. Now that usually gives me proof that I've got something here. I'm telepathic here. I'm doing something here. So my first novel is very much on about a group of people that are very telepathic. And this is how I gather information. I gather information on a subconscious level. I ask people questions, or I interact with people on a very mundane level. But in the meantime, I'm asking them questions on another level. And I then know when they answer if they hear it or not, if they hear or if they get an idea or not. And that way I can assess how awake they are, so to speak.
I understand you perfectly.
And that's more or less how my life has been. And
so how many years was it between the time when you first were told that you needed to write these books and you actually started to write?
Well, I was 28, and I think I started my first novel was out when I'm just before the age of 50.
See,
I'm a slow learner that way.
No,